The first time Julian Chen saw her, he was already running late for a board meeting that would determine the future of his pharmaceutical empire. And yet his feet stopped moving the moment her bow touched the strings. She stood against the tiled wall of the Lexington Avenue subway station, her violin case open at her feet with a scattering of bills and coins inside. Her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and her eyes were closed as she played something hauntingly beautiful that he could not name. The morning rush swirled around her, commuters streaming past in their determination to catch trains and make appointments, but she existed in her own world entirely. The music rose above the screech of metal wheels and the automated announcements, cutting through the chaos with a purity that made Julian's chest tighten unexpectedly. He stood there for what might have been seconds or minutes, briefcase in hand, silk tie perfectly knotted, watching her fingers dance across the fingerboard with practiced grace. When she opened her eyes briefly, they were a striking green that seemed to glow even in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the station. She did not look at him specifically, her gaze sweeping over the crowd as if searching for something she expected never to find. The announcement for his train blared through the speakers. Julian blinked, suddenly remembering where he was and what he was supposed to be doing. He fumbled for his wallet, pulled out a $20 bill, and dropped it into her case before sprinting toward the platform. He could see the doors beginning to close and pushed himself faster, but his body would not cooperate quickly enough. The train pulled away just as he reached the yellow line, leaving him standing there breathing hard and staring at the dark tunnel. It had been the first time in 8 years that Julian Chen had missed his morning train. He called his assistant from the platform. "Patricia, I am going to be 30 minutes late. Please offer everyone coffee and tell them I apologize for the delay. Is everything all right?" Patricia's voice crackled with concern through his phone. She had worked for him long enough to know that he was never late. "Everything is fine. There was a delay on my end." He caught the next train and made it to his meeting, but throughout the entire 3-hour discussion about FDA approvals and manufacturing costs, he kept hearing that violin melody in his head. He could not focus properly, which was unlike him. Julian had built Chen Pharmaceuticals from the ground up after finishing his doctorate at 26, and he had not done so by being distracted. Yet here he was, barely able to concentrate on quarterly projections, because he was thinking about a street musician in a subway station. The next morning, Julian told himself he would walk straight to his train. He had an investor call at 8:30 that he could not miss. But when he descended the stairs into the station and heard the first notes of her violin, his feet carried him toward the sound as if pulled by invisible strings. She was playing something different today, something faster and more complex that made him think of summer thunderstorms. Her eyes were open this time, and she was smiling slightly as she played, as if the music itself was telling her a private joke. Julian stood in the same spot as yesterday, watching her. She wore jeans and a faded blue sweater that had seen better days, and her violin looked old but well cared for. There was something magnetic about her presence, something that made it impossible to look away. Other commuters paused too, some dropping money into her case, others simply stopping for a moment before the demands of their schedules pulled them onward. The announcement for his train came again. Julian checked his watch, did a quick mental calculation, and decided he could afford to miss this one. There would be another in 10 minutes. He would still make his call, just with less buffer time than he usually preferred. He waited until she finished the piece, then stepped forward and placed a $50 bill in her case. She looked up at him, surprised. "Thank you. That is very generous." Her voice was lower than he had expected, with a slight rasp that suggested she might be getting over a cold. Up close, He could see faint freckles across her nose and the calluses on her fingertips from years of playing. "You are incredibly talented," Julian said. "What was that piece?" "Paganini. Caprice number 5. She tilted her head, studying him with those remarkable green eyes. "You have good taste if you stop to ask." "I do not know much about classical music," he admitted, "but I know what sounds beautiful." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "Well, thank you for listening. Most people just rush past. That seems like their loss." She smiled at that, a real smile that transformed her entire face, and Julian felt something shift in his chest. Before he could say anything else, another announcement reminded him that he had a train to catch. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "Have a good day." He made it to the platform just in time to watch his train pull away for the second day in a row. Patricia was less understanding about his tardiness this time. "Julian, the investors were not happy about being kept waiting. Is there something going on that I should know about?" "No, nothing is wrong. I will be on time tomorrow." But he was not on time the next day or the day after that. Each morning, Julian found himself drawn to that spot in the station where she played, standing among the commuters and the noise, listening to whatever piece she had chosen. Sometimes it was classical, sometimes jazz, occasionally something he suspected she had composed herself. She played with such emotion that he could feel it resonating in his bones. They began to talk during the brief moments between pieces. Her name was Elara Morgan. She was 27, 3 years younger than he was, and she had studied violin at a conservatory before dropping out in her final year. She did not explain why, and he did not push. She played in the subway station 5 mornings a week, then gave private lessons in the afternoons and played wedding gigs on weekends. "It is not what I imagined doing with my life," she admitted on the 5th morning, "but it pays the rent and I get to play music every day." That is more than a lot of people can say. Julian understood that. He loved his work, loved the challenge of bringing new treatments to market, but he also remembered the years of 80-hour weeks and constant stress that had gotten him there. "Do you ever perform in concert halls?" Something flickered across her face, too quick for him to identify. "Not anymore. I prefer smaller audiences anyway, more intimate." He wanted to ask more, but his train was approaching, and this time he actually needed to catch it. He had a meeting with the board that he absolutely could not miss. "I will see you tomorrow," he asked. "I will be here." Julian made himself get on the train. As it pulled away from the station, he looked back and caught a glimpse of Elara watching him. She raised her bow in a small wave, and he felt absurdly pleased by the gesture. That night, he looked her up online. There was not much to find: a few mentions of competition wins from her teenage years, a profile on a musicians for hire website, some videos of her playing at weddings. Nothing that explained why someone with her talent was busking in subway stations instead of playing with orchestras. It bothered him more than it should have. 2 weeks passed. Julian missed his regular train every single day, and he stopped bothering to make excuses to Patricia. She had figured out something was different anyway, though she was too professional to comment on it directly. His schedule became rearranged to accommodate his later arrivals, meetings pushed back, calls rescheduled. His board members noticed but said nothing. Julian Chen had earned enough goodwill and profit for the company that a 30-minute shift in his morning routine was hardly grounds for complaint. His conversations with Elara grew longer. She told him about growing up in a small town upstate, about her parents who had supported her musical dreams even though they did not have much money, about her 2 younger brothers who were both in college now. Julian found himself sharing things he rarely talked about: how his parents had immigrated from Taiwan with nothing, how his father had worked 3 jobs to put him through school, How building the company had been as much about honoring that sacrifice as it had been about his own ambitions. "You must be pretty successful then," Elara said one morning, eyeing his custom-tailored suit. "I mean, obviously you are doing well, but you talk about your company like it is something major." Julian hesitated. He had not explicitly told her what he did, only that he worked in pharmaceuticals. "We have done well, yes. That is good. The world needs more medications, better treatments. I bet that feels meaningful." "It does," he said honestly. "Though sometimes I wonder if I have sacrificed too much for it. I do not have much of a personal life. No girlfriend waiting at home. No. No time for that, I suppose." He met her eyes. "What about you? No boyfriend? Musicians make terrible partners, according to my last ex. Too flaky, too poor, too impractical." "He sounds like an idiot." Elara laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "He was, actually. But he was not wrong about the poor part. Do you know what the average income is for freelance musicians in New York? It is depressing. And yet you keep playing. What else would I do? This is who I am." She lifted her violin as if to demonstrate. "Besides, I meet interesting people. Like mysterious pharmaceutical executives who miss their train every day to listen to subway musicians." Julian felt his face heat. "I enjoy listening to you play. I have noticed." Her tone was teasing but not unkind. "You are my best customer, you know. I make more money from you in a week than most people give me in a month." He had been putting $100 in her case each morning, though he tried to do it subtly. "You deserve it. Your talent should not go unrewarded. Most people do not see it that way. To them, I am just background noise for their commute. Then most people are not paying attention." She looked at him for a long moment, something soft and uncertain in her expression. "Why do you keep coming back, Julian? Really?" "Because I cannot stop thinking about you," he wanted to say. "Because you have become the best part of my day. Because when you play, I remember that there is more to life than profit margins and market share." "Instead," he said, "because your music makes me feel something I had forgotten how to feel." The announcement for his train interrupted before she could respond, but he saw the way her eyes widened, the slight part of her lips. He forced himself to walk toward the platform, feeling her gaze on his back the entire way. That evening, Julian sat in his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park and admitted to himself that what he felt for Elara had moved well beyond appreciation for a talented musician. He was falling for her, had been falling for her since that first morning when her playing had stopped him in his tracks. It was inconvenient and complicated and potentially foolish, but it was also undeniable. The question was what to do about it. Julian was not a man who did things halfway. When he wanted something, he pursued it with singular focus and determination. But this was different from closing a business deal or navigating FDA regulations. This was about a woman who might not feel the same way, who had her own life and dreams, who might not want anything to do with a workaholic pharmaceutical executive who had more money than free time. He decided he needed to take a risk. The next morning, Julian arrived at the station with his usual briefcase, but also with a bouquet of flowers, simple daisies, nothing too extravagant. Elara was already playing when he got there, something slow and melancholy that made him think of autumn rain. He waited until she finished, then approached and offered her the flowers. She stared at them, then at him. "What are these for?" "For you. I thought you might like them." "Julian." She looked torn between pleased and uncertain. "You do not have to bring me gifts." "I know I do not have to." "I wanted to." He paused, gathering his courage. "Elara, would you have dinner with me? Not here, not in a subway station. A real dinner at a real restaurant." She held the flowers against her chest, her expression difficult to read. "Are you asking me on a date?" "Yes, if that is all right." I do not know if that is a good idea. His heart sank. Why not? Because you are clearly successful and established, and I am a subway musician who can barely afford my rent. We are from completely different worlds. I do not care about that. Maybe you should. Her voice was gentle but firm. Julian, you are kind and you have been incredibly generous, but I am not looking for someone to rescue me. I do not need saving. I am not trying to rescue you, he said, frustrated. I am trying to ask you to dinner because I like you. Because I think you are extraordinary. Is that so terrible? Elara closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, they were bright with something that might have been tears. You do not really know me. Then let me get to know you, please. Why? Why does it matter so much to you? Because you have changed everything. He wanted to shout. Because I think about you constantly. Because no one else has ever made me want to miss trains and rearrange my entire life just to spend a few more minutes in their presence. Because you make me want things I had convinced myself I did not need, Julian said quietly. Because when I am with you, I remember what it feels like to be excited about something beyond work. Because I have not been able to stop thinking about you for 3 weeks straight. She bit her lip, clearly wavering. One dinner, that is all I am promising. Relief flooded through him. One dinner, I will take it. They exchanged numbers, made plans for Friday evening. Julian floated through the rest of his day in a haze of anticipation and nerves. Patricia definitely noticed his improved mood, but wisely chose not to comment. Friday arrived after what felt like the longest week of Julian's life. He made reservations at a nice but not overly fancy Italian restaurant in the West Village, somewhere with good food and a relaxed atmosphere. He did not want to overwhelm Elara or make her feel uncomfortable. He arrived 15 minutes early and waited outside, checking his watch every 30 seconds. When Elara finally appeared, walking down the sidewalk in a simple black dress and leather jacket, his breath caught. She had left her hair down and it moved around her shoulders like dark silk. She was not wearing much makeup, just enough to emphasize those incredible green eyes. "Hi," she said, suddenly shy. "Hi, you look beautiful." "Thanks. You look nice too." She gestured at his dark jeans and button-down shirt. "Different from your usual suits. I thought I should try not to intimidate you with my corporate uniform." She laughed. And just like that, the tension eased. Dinner was better than Julian had dared to hope. They talked easily, discovering shared interests beyond music and medicine. Both loved old movies, terrible puns, Thai food, hiking when they could escape the city. Elara told him stories about disastrous wedding gigs and demanding lesson students. Julian described the politics of pharmaceutical development, the satisfaction of seeing a drug they had created actually help people. "It must be amazing," Elara said, twirling pasta on her fork, "to know that your work has that kind of impact. I make music, which is great, but you save lives." "Music saves lives too," Julian countered, "just in different ways. You make people feel things, you provide beauty in a world that desperately needs it. That matters." "You are very sweet. I am being honest." She studied him across the table, her expression thoughtful. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I do not know. Someone more arrogant, maybe. You have this very polished, powerful exterior, but underneath you are just genuinely kind. It is refreshing." Julian felt warmth spread through his chest. "I could say the same about you. You have every reason to be bitter about your circumstances, but you are not. You still find joy in playing." Something shuddered in her expression. "You do not know my circumstances. So tell me." Elara set down her fork, her appetite apparently vanished. For a moment, Julian thought she would deflect or change the subject. Then she sighed. "I dropped out of conservatory because I developed focal dystonia in my left hand." "Do you know what that is?" Julian searched his memory. a neurological condition that affects muscle control. Specifically, it affects fine motor control in musicians. My fingers would cramp and curl at random times, completely destroying my ability to play. I went from being one of the top students in my class to barely being able to hold my violin in the span of 6 months. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but he could hear the pain underneath. I saw specialists, tried every treatment, but nothing helped. Eventually, I had to accept that my dream of playing in a major orchestra was over. "But you still play," Julian said gently. "How?" "Physical therapy, lots of patience, and accepting my limitations. I can play for short periods now, but I could never handle the demands of an orchestral schedule. Subway sets work because I can take breaks whenever I need to. Teaching is fine because I am mostly demonstrating, not performing. It is not what I wanted, but I have made peace with it." Julian wanted to reach across the table and take her hand, but he was not sure if the gesture would be welcome. That must have been devastating. It was. For a long time, I was angry at the universe, at my body, at everyone who could still play without difficulty. But eventually, I realized that anger was not helping anything. I could either stop playing entirely or find a way to adapt. I chose to adapt. "You are remarkable." She laughed, but it sounded sad. "I am just stubborn. There is a difference." "I disagree. Stubbornness is refusing to give up when things get hard. Resilience is finding new ways forward when the old path's close. You have resilience." Elara looked at him with something like wonder. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say exactly the thing I did not know I needed to hear." This time, Julian did reach across the table. He covered her hand with his, feeling the calluses on her fingertips. "Maybe I am just paying attention." She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. They sat like that for a moment, connected across the table, the restaurant noise fading into background buzz. "I am glad you asked me to dinner," Elara said softly. "I am glad you said yes." They stayed at the restaurant until the waiter politely indicated they needed the table. Julian paid the bill despite Elara's protests, and they walked out into the cool night air. The city buzzed around them, taxis honking, people laughing, the constant hum of New York being itself. "Can I walk you home?" Julian asked. "I am in Brooklyn. That is quite a walk." "Then can I ride the subway with you?" Elara smiled. "That would be nice." They took the train together, sitting close in the mostly empty car. Julian was acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched shoulder against shoulder, thigh against thigh. When Elara leaned her head on his shoulder, he felt like his heart might actually explode from happiness. Her apartment was in a converted warehouse building, the kind of place that probably used to be industrial before Brooklyn became trendy. Julian walked her to her door, suddenly nervous in a way he had not been since high school. "Thank you for dinner," Elara said. "I had a really good time." "Me too. Can I see you again? Not just at the subway station, I mean." "I would like that. Tomorrow," she laughed. "You do not waste time, do you?" "I have already wasted 3 weeks standing in a subway station when I could have been doing this." He cupped her face in his hands, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, he kissed her. It was soft and sweet and perfect. She tasted like the tiramisu they had shared for dessert. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "Okay, tomorrow," Elara agreed, "but nothing fancy. I want to show you my world." "Deal." Julian practically floated home. He felt like a teenager, giddy and reckless and completely infatuated. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. True to her word, Elara showed him her world over the next few weeks. They got dollar pizza at 2 in the morning after one of her wedding gigs. She took him to open mic nights at tiny venues in Queens where musicians played for audiences of 12 people. They walked through Prospect Park on Sunday mornings, ate at diners with cracked vinyl booths, explored used bookstores in the village. Julian discovered that Elara knew New York in a way he never had, despite having lived there for years. She knew the best taco truck in Brooklyn, which subway musicians were worth stopping to hear, where to find the hidden gardens and quiet corners in a city that never stopped moving. She introduced him to her friends' other musicians, artists, people who worked 3 jobs to pursue their passions. They were suspicious of him at first, this corporate guy in expensive clothes, but Elara's trust in him seemed to ease their concerns. In turn, Julian showed her his world, though he was less proud of it than she seemed to be of hers. He took her to charity galas, where tickets cost thousands of dollars, introduced her to board members and investors, brought her to his office, and showed her the labs where his team developed new treatments. She was fascinated by everything, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than polite obligation. "You built all this?" she asked one evening, standing in his office and looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "I had help. A lot of help. But yes, essentially." "That is incredible, Julian. Do you know how rare this is? How many people dream of building something that matters and never get close? I was lucky. Right timing, right education, right connections." She turned to face him. "Stop downplaying it. You worked hard for this. You should be proud." "I am proud," he admitted. "But lately I have been wondering if I have let it consume too much of my life. Before I met you, I could not remember the last time I did something just for fun. Everything was about the company. And now I miss trains to listen to violin music. Now I eat dollar pizza and go to dive bars and feel more alive than I have in years." Elara crossed the room and wrapped her arms around his waist. "You have done the same for me, you know. Before you, I was just going through the motions. Playing my sets, teaching my lessons, but not really feeling anything. You reminded me what it is like to be excited about something beyond just getting through the day." Julian held her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. "We are good for each other." "Yeah, we are." They were inseparable after that. Julian restructured his schedule to make more time for Elara, delegating responsibilities he would have once insisted on handling personally. His board noticed the change, but the company continued to thrive, so no one complained. Patricia just smiled knowingly whenever Elara called. Elara introduced Julian to her family via video chat, since they still lived upstate. Her parents were warm and welcoming, clearly delighted that their daughter had found someone who made her happy. Her brothers teased her mercilessly, but gave Julian their approval. It felt significant, being welcomed into that part of her life. "Your turn," Elara said one evening as they cooked dinner in his apartment. "When do I get to meet your family?" Julian focused very intently on chopping vegetables. "My parents live in California. They retired there a few years ago. So we will visit them. I would love to meet the people who raised you." "They will love you," he said, because it was true. His parents would adore Elara. But the thought of that visit made him nervous in ways he could not quite articulate. "You are worried about something," Elara observed. "What is it?" "They will have questions. About us, about where this is going." "And you do not have answers." Julian set down the knife and turned to face her. "I have answers. I am just not sure you are ready to hear them." Elara moved closer, her expression serious. "Try me." "I am in love with you," Julian said simply. "I know it has only been 2 months, and I know that is fast, but it is true. I am completely in love with you, Elara. You have changed my entire life." Her eyes filled with tears. "You cannot just say things like that while I am holding a spatula. Should I have waited for a more romantic moment? No, this is perfect." She set the spatula down and took his face in her hands. "I love you too. So much it scares me sometimes." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I have never felt this way about anyone. Because you are this incredible, successful, brilliant man, and sometimes I cannot believe you want to be with someone like me. Someone like you. Elara, you are the most talented, resilient, extraordinary person I have ever met. I am the lucky one here. She kissed him then, deep and intense, and dinner was forgotten for quite a while. Later, as they lay tangled together on his couch, Julian brought up meeting his parents again. We should go to California, maybe next month. My mother has been asking about you. You told them about me. Of course I told them about you. They wanted to know why I suddenly sounded so happy during our calls. Elara traced patterns on his chest. What did you tell them? That I met someone extraordinary. That she plays violin in subway stations and has completely upended my life in the best possible way. What did they say? My mother said it was about time I found someone who could challenge me. My father said he wants to meet the woman who finally got me to prioritize something other than work. No pressure then, Julian laughed. They will love you, I promise. They went to California 3 weeks later, flying out on a Friday afternoon. Julian's parents lived in a comfortable house in San Diego with a garden his mother tended obsessively. They welcomed Elara with open arms, literally, his mother hugging her before they even made it through the front door. Finally, his mother said, beaming, Julian has been alone for too long. We were starting to worry. Mom, I am 30 years old. I have not exactly been pining away. You have been married to your company, his father corrected. That is not the same as having a life. Dinner was loud and warm, his parents asking Elara questions about her music, her family, her dreams. She answered with genuine enthusiasm, not intimidated by their interest. Julian watched her charm his parents effortlessly and felt his love for her deepen even further. That night, as they got ready for bed in the guest room, Elara said, Your parents are wonderful. I can see where you get your kindness from. They like you. A lot. My mother already asked me when I am going to propose. Elara froze in the middle of brushing her teeth. She rinsed and turned to him. What did you tell her? That I am working on it, Julian. Too fast, he asked, suddenly nervous. I am sorry, I did not mean to pressure you. We do not have to talk about that yet. No, it is not too fast. I just did not expect. She trailed off, looking flustered in a way he found adorable. You have really thought about marrying me, Elara. I think about marrying you constantly. I think about what our life could look like, where we might live, whether our kids would have your green eyes or my dark hair. I think about growing old with you, about still listening to you play when we are both 70. So yes, I have thought about it. She crossed the room and kissed him soundly. Kids, you want kids, eventually, if you do. I do, 2, maybe 3. A house full of noise and music and chaos. That sounds perfect. They made love that night with a new level of intimacy, the unspoken acknowledgement that this was forever hanging between them. Julian had never been so certain of anything in his life. The next morning, his father pulled him aside while his mother and Elara were in the garden. You are serious about her. Completely serious. Good. She is special, Julian. Do not let her go. I do not plan to. Your mother and I did not have much when we came to this country. We built our life together from nothing. It was hard, but we had each other, and that made everything worthwhile. Money, success, all of that is good, but it means nothing if you do not have someone to share it with. Julian felt his throat tighten. I know, Dad. That is why I am not letting her get away. They returned to New York with Julian more determined than ever. He started looking at engagement rings, visiting jewelers during his lunch breaks, trying to find something that would suit Elara's style. Nothing felt right until he found a small vintage shop in the Diamond District that specialized in estate jewelry. The ring was perfect, a simple emerald-cut diamond on a platinum band, elegant without being ostentatious. Now he just needed to figure out how to propose. Julian wanted it to be meaningful, something that honored who they were as a couple. He considered elaborate schemes, renting out a concert hall, proposing at the subway station where they met, but none of them felt right. Elara was not someone who wanted grand gestures. She valued authenticity over spectacle. In the end, the moment found him rather than the other way around. They were in his apartment on a Sunday morning, rain pattering against the windows. Elara was playing her violin, something soft and improvised that she was composing on the spot. She was wearing one of his shirts and nothing else, her hair messy from sleep, completely unself-conscious in her beauty. Sunlight filtered through the clouds and caught her face, and Julian thought his heart might actually stop from how much he loved her. She finished playing and looked up at him. "Why are you staring at me like that? I want to marry you." Elara lowered her violin slowly. "What?" Julian got up from the couch and pulled the ring box from where he had hidden it in his desk drawer. He had been carrying it around for a week, waiting for the right moment. This was it. He knelt in front of her, opening the box. "Elara Morgan, you have made me happier than I ever thought possible. You have shown me what it means to really live, not just go through the motions. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to listen to you play every morning. I want to argue about whose turn it is to do dishes. I want to build a family with you. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face. "Yes. Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and she launched herself at him, nearly knocking them both over. They ended up on the floor, laughing and crying, the violin forgotten on the couch. "I cannot believe you proposed while I was in your shirt with no pants on," Elara said, hiccuping through her tears. "You are most yourself like this. That is when I love you most. You love me all the time, true. But I especially love you when you are comfortable enough to walk around my apartment in your underwear playing impromptu concerts." She kissed him, the ring catching the light on her finger. "We are engaged. We are engaged," he agreed, still slightly stunned that she had said yes. They called their families immediately. His mother cried with joy. Her parents were thrilled, her brothers demanding to know when the wedding would be. Julian and Elara looked at each other and laughed because they had not even thought that far ahead yet. "Soon," Elara told her family. "We want to get married soon. No point in waiting." They planned the wedding for 6 months later, which felt both impossibly far away and not nearly enough time. Elara wanted something small and intimate, just family and close friends. Julian agreed immediately. He would have married her at City Hall if that was what she wanted. They settled on a venue in upstate New York, near where Elara had grown up. It was a restored barn on a property that overlooked rolling hills and forest. The owner agreed to let them have the space for an afternoon in October when the leaves would be changing. Julian threw himself into wedding planning with the same focus he brought to his work. He handled the logistics while Elara managed the creative aspects, choosing flowers and music and decor. They worked together easily, compromising when they disagreed, laughing at the absurdity of some wedding traditions. "Do we really need to do the bouquet toss?" Elara asked one evening as they reviewed their timeline. "Only if you want to. It is your wedding too." "Our wedding." "And no, I think I will skip it. My single friends do not need me throwing flowers at their heads." "Fair enough." They moved in together officially, Julian's apartment becoming their shared space. Elara brought her clothes and her music and her cheerful clutter, and Julian discovered he loved coming home to evidence of her presence. Sheet music on the coffee table, her violin case in the corner, 2 coffee mugs in the sink instead of one. She still played at the subway station some mornings, though less frequently now. She had picked up more teaching clients and had started composing seriously again, working on pieces for her former classmates who had gone on to professional careers. "I think I finally figured out what I want to do," she told Julian one night. "I want to compose and teach. Performing was never really my passion anyway. I was just doing it because that was what you were supposed to do as a violinist. You would be an amazing composer. Your improvisation is always beautiful. You are biased, definitely, but also correct." The months passed quickly, filled with work and wedding planning and the simple joy of being together. Julian had never been so consistently happy. Even when things were stressful at work, or they had disagreements about wedding details, he felt grounded in a way he never had before. Elara was his home, his partner, his best friend. The night before the wedding, they stayed in separate rooms at the venue, observing tradition. Julian barely slept, too excited and nervous and impatient to wait even one more day to make Elara his wife. The ceremony took place in the late afternoon, golden autumn light filtering through the barn windows. Elara walked down the aisle to a string quartet playing something she had composed, and Julian felt tears prick his eyes at the first glimpse of her in her wedding dress. It was simple and elegant, much like Elara herself, with lace sleeves and a flowing skirt. They had written their own vows. Julian spoke about missing trains and subway stations, about finding love in unexpected places, about how she had taught him to live rather than just exist. Elara talked about music and connection, about how he had helped her see that her value was not tied to her ability to perform, about building a life based on love rather than fear. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Julian kissed Elara like his life depended on it, and their guests erupted in applause. The reception was joyful and chaotic, exactly what they had wanted. Her brothers gave embarrassing speeches. His mother cried happy tears through the entire dinner. They had their first dance to a song that Elara's string quartet played, something classical and romantic that made Julian feel like they were the only two people in the room. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to leave, Julian and Elara snuck outside to look at the stars. The night was clear and cool, the sky brilliant with constellations. "Hello, husband," Elara said, leaning against him. "Hello, wife." The word felt strange and wonderful in his mouth. "How does it feel to be married?" "Exactly the same and completely different. I do not know how to explain it." Julian did, though. It was like everything had clicked into place, like the universe had confirmed what he already knew in his heart. They belonged together, had always belonged together, would always belong together. "I love you," he said, because it was the most important thing he could say. "I love you too. Thank you for missing your train that first morning. Thank you for playing music worth stopping for." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other and in the certainty of their love, the future stretching out before them full of promise and possibility. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy, a compromise between Julian's desire to take her somewhere incredible and Elara's preference for authenticity over luxury. They stayed in small hotels, ate at local restaurants, wandered through ancient cities and tiny villages. Elara played her violin in piazzas, and Julian photographed her, wanting to capture every moment. When they returned to New York, they fell into married life with surprising ease. Julian made coffee every morning while Elara did yoga in the living room. They cooked dinner together most nights, trading stories about their days. Weekends were for exploring the city, visiting friends, working on their respective projects. Elara's composing took off in ways neither of them had anticipated. One of her pieces was performed by a chamber orchestra at Carnegie Hall, and suddenly, she was getting commissions from groups across the country. She still taught violin lessons 3 days a week because she loved working with students, but composition became her primary focus. Julian watched her flourish with deep satisfaction. She was happy, truly happy, creating music that challenged and fulfilled her in ways that performing never had. The focal dystonia was still there, still limited what she could do, but she had found a path that worked with her limitations rather than against them. 2 years into their marriage, Elara told Julian she was ready to start trying for children. They had talked about it extensively, both wanting a family but understanding that the timing needed to be right. Julian's company was stable, Elara's career was established, their relationship was strong. It felt like the right moment. It took 6 months before Elara got pregnant. When she showed him the positive test, Julian picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying. They called their families immediately, sharing the news that they were going to be parents. Pregnancy suited Elara. She glowed with health and happiness, even through the morning sickness and exhaustion. Julian was obsessively protective, reading every book about pregnancy and fetal development he could find, making sure she ate well and rested enough. She teased him about it but seemed to appreciate his care. Their daughter was born on a snowy February morning after 12 hours of labor. Julian held her for the first time and understood what people meant when they said love could be instant and overwhelming. She was perfect, with Elara's green eyes and a shock of dark hair. They named her Maya, after Julian's grandmother. She was an easy baby, more curious than fussy, always watching the world with those bright green eyes. Elara played violin for her every night before bed, and Maya would stare at her mother with complete focus, as if already understanding the beauty of music. Julian fell into fatherhood naturally. He reduced his hours at work, wanting to be present for every milestone. He changed diapers and gave bottles and walked the floor with Maya when she could not sleep. His board gave him some grief about his reduced schedule, but the company continued to thrive, and ultimately what mattered was results. When Maya was 2, Elara got pregnant again. This time with twins, 2 boys who arrived 6 weeks early and spent a week in the NICU before coming home. Those were the hardest weeks of Julian's life, watching his tiny sons fight to grow stronger, feeling helpless to do anything but wait. But they made it through, and when they finally brought the boys home, their family felt complete. They named the twins Matthew and Lucas, and they were completely different from day one. Matthew was calm and observant like his father, while Lucas was energetic and dramatic like his mother. Maya adored them both, taking her role as big sister very seriously. Life became beautifully chaotic. Their apartment, once pristine and orderly, was now full of toys and children's books and evidence of 3 small humans. Julian traded his penthouse for a brownstone in Brooklyn with a yard and space for Elara to have a proper music studio. It was closer to the neighborhood where she had lived when they met, and it felt like coming full circle. Julian eventually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of Chen Pharmaceuticals, remaining as chairman but hiring a CEO to handle the daily grind. He had built the company into something remarkable, but he no longer needed to prove anything. What mattered now was his family, being present for his children, supporting Elara's career, building a life rich with love rather than just success. Lara continued composing, working from her home studio while the children were at school. Her music evolved as she did, becoming richer and more complex. She had a piece performed by the New York Philharmonic, won awards, was commissioned by major orchestras around the world. She had achieved more as a composer than she ever could have as a performer, and she did it on her own terms. Sometimes, on weekends, they would take the children into the city and ride the subway together. Meyer and the twins would watch the street musicians with wide eyes, and Julian and Elara would exchange smiles, remembering how it all started. Once, They saw a young woman playing violin at the Lexington Avenue station, and Elara put $100 bill in her case. "Someone did that for me once," she told the surprised musician. "It changed my life." The woman smiled and went back to playing, and they continued on their way, their children's hands in theirs. Julian still remembered that first morning when Elara's music had stopped him in his tracks. He remembered missing his train, remembered standing there thinking he was making a foolish choice for a woman he did not even know. It had been the best decision of his life. Their story was not perfect. They had arguments and disagreements, stressful periods when work or kids or life in general felt overwhelming. But they had built something strong, something lasting, something worth fighting for. They had built a life together based on love and mutual respect, and the willingness to show up for each other every single day. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Julian took Elara back to that subway station where they had met. It was early morning, before the real rush began, and he had arranged for the station to be temporarily closed off. He had brought a string quartet to play while he danced with his wife in the middle of the platform, where he used to stand and watch her perform. "This is insane," Elara said, laughing as he spun her around. "You closed down a subway station so we could dance. I am a millionaire, remember? I can do insane things if I want to. You are an idiot. You're idiot, though, always." The quartet played Elara's composition, the one she had written for their wedding, and Julian held his wife close and thought about all the moments that had led them here. All the missed trains, all the conversations, all the choices that had woven their lives together into something beautiful. "Thank you," he said into her hair. "For what? For playing music in a subway station, for saying yes to dinner, for building this life with me, for everything." Elara pulled back to look at him, her green eyes bright with tears. "Thank you for stopping to listen. Thank you for seeing me when most people just walked past. Thank you for loving me." They kissed there in the empty station, the music swelling around them, and Julian knew with absolute certainty that he would never stop missing trains if it meant getting to be with her. Some delays were worth it. Some wrong turns led to exactly the right place. They had 3 children, successful careers, a beautiful home, and a love that had only deepened with time. They had built a life that honored both of their dreams, that made space for music and medicine, and the messy, beautiful reality of family. They had found each other in the chaos of a subway station, and they had created something extraordinary. As they left the station that morning, walking up the stairs hand in hand back into the noise and rush of the city, Julian looked back one last time at the spot where Elara used to play. It looked like just another piece of the station now, unremarkable to anyone who did not know its significance. But to him, it would always be sacred ground, the place where his whole life had changed because he had been willing to stop and listen. Years later, when their children were grown and had families of their own, Julian and Elara would tell the story of how they met. Their grandchildren would listen with wide eyes to the tale of the subway musician and the millionaire who missed his train, and they would ask if it was really true that he stopped every single day. "Every single day," Julian would confirm. "Best decision I ever made." And Elara would laugh and take his hand, and they would sit together on their porch watching the sunset, still in love after all those years, still grateful for that first morning when music had been enough to make a man miss his train. Their love story had started with a violin and a subway station, but it had grown into something far bigger and more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. It had become a marriage, a family, a life built on the foundation of choosing each other every single day. Just like Julian had once chosen to miss his train, they chose each other through every challenge and triumph, every ordinary moment an extraordinary one. And in the end, That was what love really was. Not grand gestures or perfect moments, though they had those too. Love was showing up, listening, seeing each other truly, and choosing to stay even when it would be easier to walk away. Love was missing trains and changing plans and rearranging your entire life because someone's music made you feel alive. Julian Chen had been a successful millionaire before he met Elara. He had built an empire, achieved everything he had set out to accomplish. But it was not until he stopped on that subway platform, until he let himself be drawn to the sound of a violin cutting through the morning chaos, that he discovered what it meant to be truly wealthy. Wealth was not money or power or prestige. Wealth was this: a life full of love, a partner who challenged and supported you, children who filled your days with laughter and chaos, and the knowledge that you had built something meaningful together. He had missed his train every day for weeks, and in doing so, he had caught something far more valuable. He had caught Elara, and she had caught him right back, and together, they had created a life that was richer and more beautiful than anything he could have planned or predicted. And so they lived, happily ever after, the subway musician and the millionaire, proof that sometimes the best things in life happen when you are willing to miss your train.